So, cost in relation to products. Now, this is an age-old question: is what creates cost, like what creates value, even. Now, conventionally, we think with products that the more valuable the material, the more the product will cost. You'd think normally that still hold true, right? But actually, no. Um, there's all sorts of factors that go into creating value in a product and then generating a certain price point. And that's something that designers need to very much be aware of, and users, the people that buy the products. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump forward there. So let's take this example here of the two chairs, right? So on the top left, we've got fairly nice, very generic looking IKEA chair made of pine by the looks of things. Yeah, and that's inexpensive. That's like 400 Hong Kong dollars or something like that. On the right here, we have a an incredibly unique, crafted one-off chair made from ash. Now, this chair was actually made by a guy I was at university with. We did the same course, and he had actually done a cabinet making apprenticeship before entering onto the degree that we did, which was industrial design. Now, his final year major project was to build this chair, and what's crazy is he basically did like most of it with a knife that he had also made himself. He just sort of whittled away at the wood and got this incredible finish. And if you look at this, the symmetry on it is just outstanding. It's an incredibly, it's very much what you call a sculptural piece, almost like a beauty piece. Now, if I was to ask you which one of these do you think would cost more to buy, you'd probably say, hopefully, the one on the right there. Now, then when we pick into the nitty-gritty of the reasons as to why, that's where it gets a bit more tricky. Because if we actually look at the materials, like we just take the raw materials by itself, nothing else. We got pine versus ash. Okay, sure, hardwood versus softwood. Hardwoods cost more because they take longer to grow. Softwoods take like 40 years or around that to mature. In tree terms, that's quick, and tends to be that softwoods come from a system. Well, they tend to be more sustainable because they grow quicker. So you would expect to pay less for pine anyway, like probably a lot less than you would for ash. Ash, and hardwoods like that, like maple and oak, they're quite expensive, really. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the production process. So we know that this guy, he actually handmade that, like not even handmade, he literally hand carved it. Now, with that, he's still got an exquisite level of craftsmanship. It's still pretty much bang on symmetry. It's got a wonderful finish on it. He's done an incredible job. This one is, by the looks of things, just a natural sanded finish on it. It'll have been made by a CNC machine, and it would come flat pack, and a user would have to assemble that themselves. So that's another thing. Another thing we can think about is brand as well. Now, IKEA is known for being very much affordable. It's sort of the go-to place for people who want to quickly buy like a chair that they need, especially if I don't know, if you're setting up like a home office these days, you go to IKEA most likely to just get a desk or like a chair or something like that, just because it's convenient. They're abundant, they're everywhere, they're inexpensive. But it's IKEA. If you were, say, kitting out, if you were the owner of a really lovely luxury boutique hotel, and boutique hotels are like kind of one-off hotels and not parts of chains, and you were the owner and you're sort of thinking, right, what are we going to kit out the hotel with? It's unlikely that you choose IKEA furniture to do that. Why? Because it's just a little bit too generic. It's a bit obvious. It's this sort of seen everywhere. You don't really, or I can imagine you probably wouldn't really want your customers who are coming to a boutique hotel to sort of have something unusual, something creative, something unique. To then come in and have like an IKEA bed, an IKEA table, they sort of think, oh, okay, this is a bit, unless it was done in an ironic, tongue-in-cheek manner. But yeah, otherwise you'd expect to sort of go in and you'd have a very unusual set of decor. Whereas if you stayed at more of a chain hotel, especially one that's fairly inexpensive, IKEA furniture, you'd be like, okay, fair enough, sure, it's just mass-produced furniture. So, whereas this chair on the right, this is the sort of thing you might more expect to see in, like, going back to the hotel analogy. That would sort of belong. It's a statement piece. It's one-off. So as soon as with products, as soon as you get into the realms of one-off and unique and one of one, it's a bit like the whole NFT world that is going on at the moment. There's a real obsession with getting something that is just unique. Doesn't even really matter what the material is. It's the fact that there is only one of something. People want it, and it's limited edition. Now, there's an interesting story to move on to. So let's look at these two watches below. We've got Swatch and Rolex. Now, Swatch, I only learned this the other day, but Swatch actually stands for second watch. I didn't actually realize that. So Swatch own like loads and loads of other watch brands. I don't know if they, I can't remember who else. No, that's it. They own Omega as one of the brands that they own. So they're a big, big, big group. Now, let's look at the difference between these two. On the one hand, excuse the pun, on the left hand, we've got, that's a good joke. On the left hand, we've got the Rolex Submariner, which is one of the Rolex like all-time classic watches. And on the right, we've got a very generic, quite kiddie-looking Swatch. Now, if I was to ask you which one do you think is more expensive, I'm guessing you'd lean more towards the Rolex than the Swatch. Why? Well, let's go into that. First off, materials. We tend to associate visually, plastic with cheap, mass-produced, generic. Metals we treat with more value. They just look nicer for one, and they are more difficult to manufacture. You can, but the manufacturing processes that go into them is a lot more costly on the whole, especially very hard materials like stainless steel, which is what Rolexes are made from. So that's one thing. Another thing, what creates the value here? Well, it's probably the brand name. Rolex have deliberately grown into a brand, even though they are conventionally what is called a tool watch brand. A tool watch brand being, when they first set out, they were actually designed to be purely functional. They were designed to be really tough and durable, and they were just for people to wear like when they're doing very much like manual labor and stuff. It was very much not a sort of gentleman's or gentle ladies luxury watch. It's kind of more become that now in the past 30, 40 years or something. Whereas the Swatch, they literally sell themselves as being, this is a watch you can bash up and not worry about because they're cheap. But it's also still got a certain level of brands to it. So brand is another thing. Now, what's mental with brands like Rolex is you could actually, well, not even could, you will pay far more for a stainless steel Rolex, like Submariner, like this, compared to if you just go and buy some gold, for example. Now, we can get into ins and outs of like how much of each material you're buying, but yeah, like if you're buying, especially say a limited edition Rolex like Submariner, like you could be paying like tens, even up to hundreds of thousands of Hong Kong dollars for one of these. And like if you just buy like gold, like gold bullion or something like that, the chances are you might pay less for it. So that's what's mental, is gold in itself is a more expensive material than stainless steel, but the brand name of Rolex and the quantity that they make means that the stainless steel product is actually more valuable. So then it's kind of like, well, hang on, how does that add up then? So that's why when designers are actually designing products to be made, these are all factors they need to consider. They need to consider who is their target audience. Like, can they afford to get away with making watches out of stainless steel, but saying, hey, but guys, it's a Rolex and it's really, really valuable. And plus, another thing that Rolex do, which is, it's not cheeky, it's just something they do to create value, is that they say, yeah, guys, this year we're releasing a special edition Submariner for like 2022, and we're only going to make 1,000 of them. Suddenly you'll find like the value of those will go like sky high because there's only 1,000, and all like watch collectors will suddenly be clamoring to get one because they know that in say 40 years time, they'll look back and say, oh, wow, you got the 2022 Rolex Submariner? That's amazing. Like, how did you get hold of one of those? That's how value's made in products. Honestly, like limited edition is basically the way to go to create value in a product. You either make something that's so cheap and abundant that you can just like plow that into the market and dominate a market area, or you do something that is incredibly bespoke, luxury, unique, limited edition, one of one, whatever, and you build value that way. So that's like a huge difference there. Now, a little video I've put down on the right here when we're talking about comparisons of value is to look at an interesting manufacturing process. Now, McLaren, which is traditionally known as being like a crazy supercar brand, like they make really fast supercars, even though top end Tesla is actually faster than them. But anyway, um, it's interesting to look at the manufacturing process, because to create value in the manufacture in the cars, partly the brand, but they also pride themselves on the advancement of the manufacturing technology that they use, and that is kind of what makes the cars so valuable. And also they'll say that this is essentially a handmade car, or it's a hand assembled car, or something like that. So whenever you add into a product and you can put on it like handmade, or even better with certain products, particularly say watches, it says made in Europe, or even better, like made in Germany or made in Switzerland or something like that. With watches saying Swiss made, that is like the benchmark to say this is a luxurious watch. Like if you said, like, if you had a watch brand and you said made in the UK, it just wouldn't carry as much clout. Like, Swiss made, that's what people expect with watches. So yeah, that's the kind of things that create value and that we all have to be aware of as designers.